Welcome, everybody. This is October's Augmented Society Network discussion. We are discussing ownership and looking at the wider picture of who owns what in both the real and digital world. It's always been an issue for us who owns software, who owns the moon, for example, with countries rushing to put flags on our wonderful planet that belongs to everyone. It's becoming more, for me anyway, interesting because of Internet 3.0, which is an aim or an objective to tidy up, to once and for all enable us to hold and manage our own data. The idea behind this is that we actually move to a distributed form of information sharing. I think it's a lofty goal. I think it has a lot of challenges. And it's interesting in terms of technology's evolution. If we look back at Tim Berners-Lee's attempt to create the semantic web, for example, a meaningful place that we could all enjoy and recall in a nice, tidy and an efficient way. That unfortunately fell by the wayside, which is a huge shame when we consider terms like metaverse, for example. This is another huge area of perceived and real ownership being implied and implemented into both real and simulated worlds. So this whole idea of being able to own something, to be able to find it, to be able to have it described is something that we felt, Jonathan and I felt, we should be talking about. But this also goes back to freemium, free stuff, all the things that we use briefly because they're free and then become intrinsic parts of our lives. So this, again, we pick a huge topic, but we love doing that, because we rarely find answers, but we do have some incredible conversations. So I'm going to hand over to Jonathan to start to unpick. Please feel free to jump in. Please feel free to comment and bring any suggestions or ideas that you have. So, Jonathan, no pressure.
No pressure at all. And I'm actually going to expand. You said we have a lot to talk about. The actual title, yes, is about ownership, but a huge component is responsibility. And just to pull back the curtain on what Zoe and I do and others as well that give input as to what our topics can be, we've scheduled these things out months in advance. And when we think about what this subject is going to be, oftentimes we have a certain thing in our head that's going on at that time. And in cases like this, it's absolutely serendipitous timing with other things that are either happening right now or about to happen in the next week or so. It's fascinating. And as Zoe mentioned, it's not just about the digital realm. It's about everything that we're dealing with. So if we want to talk about digital realm, yes, it is. We'll throw it out because it's almost become a cliche to bring up Facebook. I just feel like it's overdone, but they are the huge elephant in the room now, where they have done all these things. We freely went along because it was free. It mirrored what was going on with the internet, what has gone on with the internet, that, oh, we're supposed to have access to this without thinking about, well, there's an infrastructure involved. When we talk about real world, there's municipal infrastructure. And the fact that roads have to be repaved so that there's not potholes so we can have trade. And we're seeing now issues all around the world where there are multinational corporations that are absolutely using that infrastructure, but they're choosing to factor things in so they don't have to pay the taxes to pay for that infrastructure, right? So this is not a new thing. This is not just because of Tim Berners-Lee coming up with code that led to the internet, or whoever is going to take responsibility for whatever. Everyone wants to take responsibility for the good, but who's taking responsibility for society as we move forward? As Zoe said, there is a lot to unpack here, and we could talk about this for days, let alone hours. And a lot of times we do have conversations all the times we have conversations in these sessions that are really thought-provoking, and we leave here absolutely enriched and energized for more. My hope out of this close to an hour left now is that we come out of this with some thoughts of what are some guiding measures? What are some pieces that we can bring into our own practices, both as individuals and as entities that are helping others to move forward in this world? How might we be looking at, how might we be governing? How might we be considerate of others when we manifest anything using technologies that are available to us, the municipal, the cities, the other people around us? Because as much as we want to talk about ownership, with the way a lot of business models are going right now, it's so predicated not on you bringing your absolute intellectual property to the table. It's you're bringing a framework that others are leveraging to do what they want to do. And whose responsibility is it to keep that framework safe and secure for people to use, to keep that trust there, which we have completely lost trust in so many of our systems because of people taking advantage and not taking responsibility. So to open it up, maybe we start with, like, where did this start? Like, what are some of the first examples that you've seen, whether it's that there's been success in keeping things open? And I'll use as one example, when South Korea went and laid fiber so that everybody back in 2000, if you were to look at the internet speeds in Korea, it was ridiculous because it was so much faster than anybody else had in the world. And it still is faster than most of the world has. And that was a situation where the government said, we're going to pay for this so that we can have more business done. And look at what Korea has done in terms of technology, with whether it's Samsung or a bunch of others. On the flip side of the US, where everything is put on the backs of other companies, whether it's Verizon or AT&T, to lay that infrastructure, and then they're forced to then sell it to others. There's just not an equilibrium there that behooves us. Any other examples, things that stick out like a thorn or a rose?
I'm quite interested in how public-private partnerships work. I'm actually not. I find them a bit tedious, but anyway, I don't want to lump into something totally tedious to start with, but public-private partnerships are much more prevalent in the UK than they are in the US. So something like, I think it's 2 to 3% of big infrastructure projects are public-private partnerships in the US, whereas in the UK, that is a much bigger percentage. And I'm sorry, I don't know that percentage. My thinking is that I would rather government, or we have a way of sharing responsibility, but I know that's not applicable to every issue that society has. I do know that there are parts of America that are falling apart. I do know that we have big infrastructure problems here in the US, and some of the cracks that were revealed by the pandemic are being revealed even further now.
Well, healthcare is a great example of a public-private policy in the US, because the government and pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies and the large hospitals have gotten together to give us such a great healthcare system. Everybody loves it.
That sarcasm I see just dripping off of you there, Mitch. But again, it comes down to who are they responsible to? And in that case, it feels, as somebody that you would think that I'm the consumer, there's a responsibility to me. I don't feel that way. I feel that there's a responsibility to those that hold the money.
Right. And to a large extent, this whole question of ownership, it's married to law and it's married to rules. To the extent the wealthy and the powerful control the law or control the rules, they have greater access to mold those laws and mold those rules. And anytime you pass a law or you create a rule, you're creating an imperfect version of some principle. And because it's imperfect, it opens the road to gaming. And so, those who were shaping the laws or helping to shape the laws or the rules are the ones who get the first crack at gaming it. And so, is there a way of ungaming that system?
I was going to bring up, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a book about a world post Google, and the idea that if your business model is based on free, then it's not a business model that is sustainable without massive investment. And part of the model that I use for my business is that the business itself must be sustainable, which means I can't do that. I can't have free in any sense of the word, because I don't have a huge investment that enables me to promote hugely a product which is a social good thing. It brings employment to people who were affected by the pandemic. But I don't have that leverage. There's nothing I can do that's free. And I find it quite fascinating where the investment does go, which enables companies to operate for years without
turning profit.
Yeah.
Or without breaking even. And yes. So that's where business model has been turned on its ear for numerous decades, maybe centuries in some ways. But it's so interesting, even looking at that, when Facebook came around, there was, well, we don't know how we're going to make money. And to what Mitch said about laws and how people are looking to turn that, our lawmakers, our policy wonks around the world, unfortunately, too often focus only on what is absolutely clear right now. And I know that once you start dealing with the unknowns, then you're really opening up a can of worms. But if you look at Section 230 in the United States, which protects Facebook and other social media platforms, because anybody can post anything on it and they're not responsible. If you were The Guardian or LA Times or New York Times or the Poughkeepsie Player or whatever, like even a small publisher, you're responsible, even if you're doing syndicated content, much like Facebook ultimately is syndicated content. There's another person providing that, they're running it. The newspapers, even if they're in digital form, are held responsible and are hopefully trying to hold themselves up to that. Whereas others are using a Section 230, which was created in 96, before anybody had any real sense of what the internet was going to be.
Yeah. And also GDPR, for example, in the UK, which is being seen as something very good that will eventually be adopted over here. I think, Mitch, you mentioned this ages ago, or was it? I'm not sure. But it has virtually no money to implement or to fine or to actually control that legislation. It's a toothless being. So, with one hand, it's a great thing that we all, as partly web developers, I have to create my interstitial with, do you agree with this or that, or do you want sugar with it, or do you want milk as well, and everyone just clicks on it anyway. But I do think there is good in that. And if the idea of using blockchain kind of stuff with decentralized permissioned networks can be implemented, then we have a way forward. But there are already issues with that. I don't see that as necessarily the answer. And I'm not talking about Bitcoin or anything like that. I'm talking about tokenless distributed smart contracts, which enable us all to manage our own information. But who's going to do that? I'm not going to bother doing that. I want my third party, which, for some people is not Verizon, but it is some of the telcos actually. It's the antivirus software companies that actually are behind everything that we do. And the other thing, I'll just get it out there now, is I went into Target and I suddenly thought, you know what, this feels like a data gathering exercise. Some of the shelves were empty. The quality of the products is very poor in places. And this is not just Target. When does a company turn from being a seller of products into being an influx of data, because there is a cynicism in me that sees that in some of the larger and occasionally in some of the smaller stores.
It happens when the business model collapses that they have and the money.
Yeah, that's
flows.
another interesting thing, though, because if you bring design thinking into your business, there is a very big element of not knowing what you're doing. So I understand about pivoting. I understand about seeing and listening for where your customers are. But I do feel that some of those places have very much lost their way, and the experience has completely gone.
This might get into Carlos's wheelhouse, and again, anybody please interrupt and insert.
No, I wanted to ask, sorry, what do you mean by a data company? From selling products to a data, I don't know what you said.
So well, one of the key examples is Under Armour, the sportswear company. They were actually a data company from the beginning, but they used sports apparel as a front to actually launch their data business.
It was all about sportswear, and they figured out a way to make it more about data. But
no, they didn't figure out a way. They knew that from the start.
Or they knew, right.
Yeah, they knew that from the start. So they wanted to get into the world of sports data, whereas other companies like Lululemon, for example, stumbled into it later. So there are companies that start up now on a design-centered approach who really don't know what they're going to do, but they find what they're going to do, is what I'm saying, Carlos.
When we look at the people that are building these companies, and why I said this might be in Carlos's wheelhouse based on the sociology of things. And we look at, I was teaching for Boston University in a master's program, a business master's program. And I got a little frustrated with a number of students that came in that were proposing ideas, even if it was just for their thesis, proposing ideas for companies that were all about the bottom line, all about making money. And it didn't matter how much they screwed over their customers. So in that younger generation, you've got people that are like that. They see models of this working for the previous generations. Yet we also see in these younger generations the interest in working with the B Corps, working with these other companies that are looking to do good. And when they say we're going to be open, whether it's you can use this open source, whether it's hell, even if we were to say something like Wikipedia, which I just made a donation for $50 again this year because I don't want to see ads, and I know how much communal work is done on that, and whether it's it's a great resource for me. And it's interesting because I'm asked the same questions when I look at The Guardian. Do I want to spend money to get the stuff that I already have? It's a question of, do I get it with ads or not, or which organization should be making money for me? It's all these questions. And it comes down to me to responsibility of like, who's doing this who's asking for money because they want to sustain, or who's asking for money because they want to make yet another buck. They want to increase their margins.
And that's a really big question. Who's genuinely giving content and who isn't? So on the BBC, I love the BBC. Julie and I used to work at the BBC, didn't we? At the Academy. We love nothing bad about the BBC. But now in the US, I don't have to. I watch 15 seconds or sometimes 30 seconds of advert to see 15, perhaps 25 seconds of story. So it used to be, Julie, you worked at ITV as well, didn't you? The advertising per hour was restricted on independent television to something like 20 minutes per hour. So one of my favorites, Coronation Street, there was a huge hoo-ha when each segment went to, the whole episode was 22 minutes with 8 hours of advertising. But that was monitored. That was part of what, had to be agreed. That's gone completely out of the window now. And I think it's turned in completely the wrong way.
The thing about the advertising, though, it's very well targeted, isn't it? So whatever product they're always sponsoring, whether it's kind of some chocolate bar or some furniture, and even like now, things like Coronation Street, for example, they have a Costa coffee shop, they have a Co-op supermarket, and it's all product placed. It's just like, oh, they've got their Co-op shopping bag. Oh, they've got their Costa, and they stand there and they get paid for product placement now, don't they?
Yes.
So now that's because that's now actually part of the program. The adverts are now having to be something else, aren't they? And that product placement within a program, that's going to be the norm.
Yeah, which is over here, I guess. You guys who's in America, you must just be laughing at us thinking product placement is still a relatively new thing.
So in the film, it's been there for, I mean, hell, the original movie Willy Wonka was absolutely product placement to begin with. They would not have made that movie if they didn't want to release a chocolate bar. Okay. Right. Certainly in other films, and we just had another Bond film open, and that's all about product placement. So that's been there on film side. TV side, it started gaining speed in the late 90s when it was Survivor, which was a reality TV show here that they would put a Mountain Dew as something you could win in a challenge, right? Yeah. But it's all about, in that case, it's all about economics, and that's really down a slippery slope because the monies were dropping from other places. And so the creators needed to recoup that money that they lost. Okay. So whether it was that the license fees from the networks in the States dropped, and so they had to and they couldn't make the money on international sales, then it became, well, we can sell these things in a TV show so we could get that product placement in TV. So all of these things are economic model issues that we're trying to find our way around. And that's not even talking about streaming, right? So Netflix doesn't have, like, they just want people to subscribe. And so when they have Squid Games, for them, they were able to get content, and we're getting completely off subject here. So let's bring it back. But just very quickly, they're recognizing now the economics. If we can get a show like Squid Game that for that whole series cost us much less than the Chappelle Show special that's causing a whole bunch of other issues. It's the economics are really funky. And so we've got to play out the implications of that, but that's still not really about the responsibility. If people are using, and I'll go back to when we were deciding we need a map functionality on a website back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it was at the time your choices were like MapQuest or Google Maps, or you had to build your own thing. And at the time we were thinking, oh, they're giving this for free on Google. Like, we don't really, MapQuest was having technical issues. Google seemed to be the thing. They were offering it for free. Let's take it. And we're thinking the question of taking it is they're going to come back and charge us at some point. This is early 2000s. They're going to want money for this. We were naive as industries, as a world, that they were looking to use the data. So if they're using our site, if they're using our app, and we're integrating with their product, they're able to siphon off that data, and that's where their real money is, right? Yeah. And so again, it's how we all went in blindly because we theoretically could have chosen to know better or not, but there's a lot of stuff that even now we're smart people, and there's implications. We don't know what's going to happen in 10, 15 years, but we can't just stop living. Carlos, what do you got for us?
Well, I'm going to switch a little bit the conversation. It's what is going to happen with ownership with the universal basic income, and what are the possibilities to mix that with what is happening with like Zipcar and other products that before we bought the products and now it's offered as a service, like different things. They are, with this Internet of Things, you don't have to buy a refrigerator. It will be put like a lease in your house with all the IoT things, and that's what Google will want. Now, or the Apple car that they said they're gonna create an electric driverless car in the future. I'm sure they will have different owning options. And what if I think it's going to happen, because it's a good ending or a bad ending. When universal basic income, which I'm sure is going to happen in the future, because unemployment will start growing and growing, and then I would say that's the only solution that they will have. Multinationals can just drop in and say, hey, don't give $100, give it 80, and the other 20, I will give them the services they are going to buy, or things like that. That will be the bad. The good way is they will have services like Korea, free internet as part of what we need to give to our citizens. So what is going to happen with ownership when UBI start to grow? Does the state will start like putting not only money in the UBI, but services as part of what they are given to people? But then the ironic thing is that start looking a little bit of communism.
Yes.
Because it's like, we're gonna give UBI to the people, and what is going to happen? So we're gonna start like looking a little bit like communism. So it's gonna be a huge debate about that. And well, not related with ownership is what is going to happen with free time, because then what people are going to do to feel that life is meaningful. So I just want to drop that thought. We should be starting to think that way. And in kindergarten, we should be starting to teach how to deal with this, because I would say UBI is going to happen. What is happening right now with the employment in US is it's striking. Nobody knows what to do. There are a lot of offerings and nobody wants to work again in a shitty works. So, okay, I think ownership is going to happen with UBI. That's my main idea.
So the software industry has led with SaaS, software as a service. There is very little software that you buy outright these days. Everything is subscription based. So what you're seeing there is that will proliferate out to society. My access to my fridge will be on a subscription.
But Zoe, I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes beyond it goes beyond how we're paying for it. We're dealing with infrastructure issues in major cities because you've got a bunch of people that are idling in their cars waiting for the next call for a car, right? I know that there were departments in Transport for London completely focused on what does the future hold, not just with ride sharing and things like that, but autonomous vehicles, whether it's Waymo, which is they've gotten now in 2 states in the US approval to do absolute testing. And I think we are going to see a lot of that. Just the leasing of, if I'm not going to need to buy a car because I can have a car on call at any time, what does that mean? It's not an ownership thing. It's a rental thing. And again, it comes down to whose responsibility is it? Is it my responsibility as the consumer that I have to pay for all the infrastructure and the company doesn't?
But is it the case then that our problems are so large that only something on a government scale can fix stuff?
So I believe that it's got to be an oversight scale, like a foresight scale, because we're not looking at the future. Emily, did you want to? I'm sorry, Mitch, you were saying something.
Well, I was just going to go back to Carlos with UBI. Okay. And as Carlos was talking, one of the things that hit me is that Argentina is a great example of what's likely to go wrong with UBI, that in order to stay in power, the government has to offer more and more free services. And as they offer more and more free services, the tax base is actually less and less. And so you get this ping pong where the government just they offer more, then they try to tax their tax base more, and because the tax base, just it lowers the incentive to be in the real economy. Tax base shrinks, but then they still have the pressure to add more, so they add more, and then they tax more, and you end up with a very unstable government.
All of those are knee-jerk reactions. Emily,
right.
So I don't remember where I heard this or read about it, but in terms of UBI, but I thought it was super interesting in terms of, so I'm in Portland, Oregon. There've been a few riots here. I don't know if you've heard, but anyway, attaching UBI to, and maybe you guys already talked about it because I have to be in and out of something else too, but attaching it to something that is meaningful to you, like caregiving. So I've got an 80-year-old mom. I still have to do some grocery stuff for her, even though there's Instacart, and I still have to take her to appointments, whatnot. So you've got to attach it to something. And then maybe that bleeds out to not just your own family, but other people. So you're caretaking for other people too, just as one example. Anyway, I really like that idea in terms of earning it. Yeah, you actually have, it's not just sitting around and you get a check. It's actually, you have metrics, and you have, say a client base or whatever. And so I think it's a long shot, because we're going to have to get out of this extreme individualism, right? And get more into collaboration, more into sharing, because from where I sit, I see a lot of issues, and I'm don't mean to be Debbie Downer, but wow, it's a lot from the retire. And I'm especially passionate about the retirement crisis and pre-retirement and people not being able to get hired, who are older professionals. So anyway, there's a lot.
Finland is an example of what can go right with something like UBI, because in Finland, everybody who lives in Finland feels a responsibility to the society. So even though they can get the compensation without working, they do not want to be long-term on the compensation without working, because they want to contribute. But that's kind of a monoculture. And I'll say, every time I bring them up as an example to virtually anybody, it's like, yeah, they can do that because they all come from the same background. There's only 6 million people. That everybody says that can't work in a bigger country like the U.S. And I don't know.
So in the U.S., in Los Angeles, there's a small town that's part of the larger Los Angeles entity, which is, I believe it is Compton, right? Which has its own history and prejudices against it. Yet they did a pilot program with UBI. And what they found was that people were able to, because they weren't stressing as much, working their minimum wage jobs, which even in LA, it's $15 as opposed to $7.62 like it is in other parts of the US. They were able to do those things that Emily was talking about without the stress. They were more productive because that base income was taken care of. And Emily, what you were talking about really fascinates. And I've always wanted to see how this could happen, where we are able to assign credits for those things that are not measurable financially. And we talked about that in previous sessions here, especially when we were talking about value. Whether it's, I was in a conversation the other day where somebody was talking about tithing, you in religious circles or others, where you take 10% of your revenue. With all of those things, we're seeing that the impact is that those who have and can even afford to give 10% have so much, are valued and have so much more of a say in what happens. Yet there's many people that have amazing hearts that have the time that they could give, like whether it's called doing Seva or what have you, where they can give back. And we as a society are not at this point giving enough credence to that, giving enough weight to that. And how can we shift that mindset? And it's almost like, in order to shift the mindset, as you say, Emily, there's got to be some way to capture the value, to say, I've got this many credits and that's worth blank. And all of this is about thinking ahead. That just because you're doing this, like Emily, as you said, with your mother, yeah, sure, there's Instacart, but that doesn't solve everything. You know, there's UBI, but that doesn't solve everything. And we're not, what can be the impetus for all of us as short of blowing everything up and starting from scratch, totally, where can we shift this so that we are thinking ahead, where we are in groups that are looking at, well, what about this permutation? What about if we do this, then what happens? And it reminds me of that great movie from the 80s, War Games. Shall we play a game? If you remember the Matthew Broderick movie, where there's a computer that's working through all of the permutations to figure out how you could actually win this nuclear war. Until ultimately you find out it can't. I'm sure we can put models through computers, and Zoe and I were talking about what kind of data we're using. And the fact that, are you using data that is model data, or are you using, if in Web 3.0, we're going to be able to have at scale, hopefully, data that's organic. And we've got to be able to work that ever-changing organic data to be able to build out what the future possibilities are.
But even with all that, there's still a lot of inequality, isn't there? In the UK,
Yeah.
the government talk about levelling up, whatever that actually means. And that's kind of, everything is all about levelling up and about the idea, of equality, where, the kind of the poorer areas, everything moves out of London, that you invest in the kind of poorer areas, the kind of coastal areas, to kind of, try and give everyone like this kind of level playing field. But the reality of it is it doesn't work like that, because wealthy people are not going to start giving away their money to the poorer people, because the wealthy people are making plans to go and live in space when they've ruined when they've ruined planet Earth. It is as basic as that. We say, okay, yeah. But even in the UK, it's like, what does it actually mean, the levelling up? I mean, there's a whole debate on that. It's about inequality in theory, but
just very quickly, leveling up is from the gamer world, where you go through different levels. And so if I get past level 12, if I stop my game, I don't need to go back to level 1 and start over again. And that's what that whole concept of leveling up was.
I think there's some very simplistic things. Build back better, level up.
Boris Johnson's got all the keywords, hasn't he?
Yeah, there are some
all the banter.
Yeah, don't forget to lean in. And fail forward. Everybody should be failing forward.
yes, we've gone. Yeah, we're lazy. We've got awful titles for things. We've got titles that are used in one world being applied to another, that we're all supposed to understand and make it all very simple, when all of the problems are very, very complex. I am heartened that Carlos thinks UBI will happen. I'm on the other side. Mitch, sorry.
No, I was just saying there's a large percentage of the population. My guess is it's well over 50%, but whose whole approach to life is your responsibility is to do the minimum you're forced to do in order to do what you want, to avoid costs as much as you can, which includes taxes. And the more you get away with, the more effective you are. And if you want to change that, there are short-term and there are long-term things. If in the short term, one thing that counters that is shame. So to the extent that you can shed light on how little people are doing and how much they're pulling from the system, that shames people into doing more. And in the longer term is kind of an education and socialization, so that we can, hopefully build a culture where, similar to Finland, where everybody feels that they're part of something and that they benefit by contributing to it.
Yeah. Eleanor?
Where do the funds for UBI come from?
You.
Our taxes.
Our taxes. Okay. And is UBI taxed?
That I don't know.
I would imagine it would go into forming the basis of your general income, so that you were able to, I would hate for you to be stuck in UBI and not be able to augment and grow yourself. So I would imagine it would be But it wouldn't be, but it would be once it got above a certain level, is my understanding.
Okay, so unemployment, if you take unemployment, you're taxed on that. So you're like SOL, you don't have a job, you might not be able to get one, and yet you're going to be taxed on it, whether that's $100 a month or a week or 400 or whatever.
Well,
So
same as you taxed on Social Security.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you say a little bit more about the shaming piece? I don't know who said that, but it's super interesting because like, and this is a little bit off, but does anybody remember in the US the ad of the Indian with the teardrop about pollution,
yes.
right? Mm-hmm. And so that was shaming people who litter. Okay.
But that's not direct shaming. Go ahead. Okay. So what I meant is if there was a calculator of some type, and so we knew that Jeff Bezos was pulling $3 billion a year and he was contributing $50,000 a year, then he would see that every day and he would not want to be shamed by that, and he would contribute more. So it's very,
you just said something very key there, Mitch.
I love that.
Not, you said something very key when you said he would not want to be shamed by that.
Yeah.
Right.
People have been saying that for a long time. Amazon has been getting away with not paying taxes in other countries for a long time. Has that changed him? So interestingly, there's a documentary that just came out called 15 Minutes of Shame. Mm-hmm. It is one of the Monica Lewinsky is one of the EPs on it.
Yeah.
And it's a fascinating watch because with these people where their lives were torn apart, there's always a backstory. There's always another story that doesn't make it out, right? Mm-hmm. And these people were shamed and their lives were turned upside down for things that if we knew the whole story, we would have thought differently in the first part, but everybody else made out scot-free. Nothing else changed, right? So the people, to your point, Mitch, the people that weren't caught, they win.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's something that to me is so much more intrinsic. And how do we think about others? How do we think about society? How do we get me first out of the equation and us together into the equation? And that's until we can do that, then I think we are going in circles in these sessions about what can or can't happen.
So we should come up with a list of 20 things that we could possibly do and then winnow it down to the top 3 and do them.
Personally, have an action plan that we do personally.
And
then come up with a build back bigger.
Right. Not that,
this is a plan for the greater good, is it?
I don't want to seem simplistic, but I don't want to seem simplistic by saying we should come up with 20 and do the first 3, because those first 3, the top 3, they're not going to work in and of themselves. So we should do the top 3 so that we could get feedback and further refine them, because it's going to be an iterative process in order to actually achieve that goal.
So
I'd
Mitch,
like to, go ahead.
No, you go, Emily.
I'd like to hear somebody's top thing that they want to solve, or just if you've been thinking about something for a long time, I would love to hear somebody talk about what their passion is about, what their top priority would be to change.
So just
whether it's in the UK or wherever.
Yeah, my top priority is to stop putting myself first in anything. Getting a car parking space, I will stop and I will let someone take it. Coming out of the supermarket, I will wait. And it has taken so much pressure off. I feel so much calmer because I don't have the desire to be in front first, have more advantage. I have relaxed, and it's taken me a very long time to do that. And I don't manage it every day.
I love that. I saw a t-shirt yesterday that said, kindness is the new cool.
Yeah, it's something like that would be my top one.
So these stemmed from conversations we were having with Amy, weren't they?
Yes.
But in terms of like that's for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think we were having, when we were writing the paper with Amy, we were having lots of kind of conversations, weren't we, about how we put pressure on ourselves, about the kind of small acts of kind of kindness and things that we can do that makes a huge difference to, like as we said, letting somebody have that car parking space that might be in a hurry to go somewhere, you know, waiting a second to allow somebody to kind of come in and out through the shop door, you know, and giving those kind of space, you know, for us it seems like nothing. For them, depending on what their physical kind of their mindset is, it could be the hugest thing, like that, you know, saying good morning to somebody who might not have spoken to any for ages. For them, for you, it's just good morning. For them, it means the world. It's like those small acts of kindness, often that just that mean everything to someone else.
Yes.
Here's a different tack that everybody could practice. I think everybody maybe should, is the recognition that not everything is about me. The way people respond doesn't necessarily have to, unless I say something, there's an automatic response to that. Yeah, that's a response to me, but there's so much that we don't know what's going on with that other person. That
so
even that response to
you're
me,
absolutely right, because it's actually all about me.
Yeah,
right. It's all about Mitch.
Exactly.
As once we come to the realization that everything is about Mitch, it's going to make our lives so much easier.
The way I try to do that is, so if I say, oh, I love the sunny day, someone else says, I don't like sunny days. That wasn't what I was saying. I was just telling you that it was a sunny day. If you can think when you reply and say something more along the lines of, what is it about the sun that you like? I try and think about a way to respond to somebody that is about what they've said, not my reaction to it.
But also, Zoe, if you take what he said or she said as not just because they don't like the sun, it's not an affront to you.
No, but they're immediately reflecting it. You don't need to do that. You don't need to say anything. I don't need to know that you don't like the sun. All I've done is say, I love sunny days. What tends to happen is people will react to that as if I've asked them something about the fact that it's a lovely sunny day. I haven't. I've just said it's a lovely sunny day. Think when you ask somebody, when someone speaks, respond to what they've said, not what you want to say. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, Emily, your question was a really good one. I keep thinking about what to say with your, well, not question, but invitation. And I don't know what to say. This is like...
After you said that, like I wrote down one that I was thinking is teach people techniques so that they learn how to get out of an anxiety state and into a resourceful state of mind.
I love that. That's cool. That's
I try people to be more self-reflective. I think society hasn't teach us, educate us, or socialize us to be more authentic, which comes from self-reflection. So that will be mine, but it's not something easy to do or that I do every day. I just know that I do it when I teach, when I talk, but I don't want to bother myself or kill myself into how much I am doing of this or how effective, but I do it.
And so do you meditate? Is that part of your routine? Is that part of the...
No, it's that I have always asked this question, why people don't do what they really want to do. And it has killing me. Well, actually, that's my kind of one of the goals of my dissertation was that. Not specifically that question, but why people don't do what they do. And if you have heard about Bronnie Ware's book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, the number one is that one. Not do what the heart was telling you to do. So that's, if I win the lotto,
it's back to shame, that's why.
Tomorrow, I will put all the money into social media campaigns to do that. Like people actually think about that. And I love that book and I highly recommend it. It's really good. So, but it's not about meditation. It's more like what is your passion, and follow your passion. But that's not what society is not structured about. That it's structured about making money, which is really sad.
But it's also about that thing about always worrying about what other people think, other people's opinions. You know, everyone's got this idea of what success is. And you're always thinking, oh, I'm not successful enough because so-and-so's got more than me. So that also we learn to be kind of content with what you have got. You know, saying, you know what, I've done my best and I'm happy with what I've got. Yes, you might have the bigger house and the bigger car than me, but you know what I've got suits me and I am happy and I'm content, and therefore I can spend my time enjoying my life, not the kind of keeping up with the Joneses.
Or you can be comfortable in saying, I don't even want that house. I don't want that life. I got exactly what I wanted.
Exactly, yeah.
I think Carlos's cat needs to comment.
Come and live with me.
I know. The cat is so cool.
Yeah.
You're famous, Zoe.
Just looked a couple
you know,
of
Zoe, that's her name. I'm sorry, Zoe.
Wait, what did you say, Eleonora?
No, I was just saying the cat was so cool. Looked at the camera maybe once, just, you know, whatever they're talking about.
Yeah.
What do they know? You know.
Yeah, we have our answer. Did you want to say something though, Eleanor?
Be more cat.
No, I don't know. I just think that I found that during the lockdowns, and that I have paid more attention to total strangers than I ever do, because, you know, I live in London, I come from New York, big cities, so you don't talk and have an interaction just because it was somebody to talk to. You make eye contact, you say something, and then you just keep going. And those moments in the last year have been so special and have made me feel good. And if I make somebody laugh or we laugh together over something, it's an interaction that, you know, it might make the whole day feel better. And that's nice.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's remembering to try and do a little bit more of that if we ever go back to whatever normal is, or a new normal.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me how the topic first talked about ownership, and then responsibility is the second part of the topic. And where we've morphed is to the discussion is, how do we develop in ourselves and in the world a greater sense of responsibility?
Yes. Love it, love it, love it. Mitch, you sort of teed that off, and Emily, you like totally brought it across the line. And that's what we love about these, is that we don't know where they're going to go when they start. And when I did my part of the intro, when I was saying I would love to have actionable pieces that we can take forward, this is a beautiful one. It's how can we take responsibility to do our part? And hopefully, if enough of the world takes responsibility to do their part, to be looking out for others, to be mindful, to do the things that are not just about me first, me only, imagine what can happen. And that's truly special. I think, Zoe, we're out of time.
We are, yeah. I was just, obviously the gems were dropping in at the last minute there, and I always hate to bring it to an end, but we will. And we're meeting again on the 18th of November. We have another enormous topic, which I hope you'll find exciting, which is climate acceleration. Can't stop, won't stop. I'm
looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I think this will actually find ourselves thinking about ourselves again, actually.
Yeah.
And being our best selves, and realizing that actually, if we don't do something, more fool us. So I think on that note, I'm going to say thank you for another absolutely fantastic conversation. I really hope that you can join us on the 18th. I'm going to say goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.